Hello and welcome back to FFS for Finance's Sake, where we explore finance, ideas and stories that push the envelope. I'm your host, Rachel Chadwick-Harrison, Chartered Accountant and MD of Chadwick Accountants in Warwickshire. And today I'm thrilled to have a guest who sits right at the intersection of real-world advice, regulation and client life stories. Tony Ross, founder and Chartered Financial Planner at Velocity Financial Planning in Warwickshire. Tony, thanks for joining me.
No, pleasure to be here, Rach. Yeah, it's my first podcast, so excited to share ideas and thoughts on today's session.
Well, I'm really pleased to have you here. Before we kick off, just a quick note. We'll dig deep. Part of why I wanted you on this is to do a full fact financial planning, aligning money with life goals, not just numbers. I want our listeners to walk away with insights, caution flags, and maybe a few surprises. So, Tony, many listeners will know you via your firm. But tell us your backstory. How did you end up in advice? What was the journey to founding Velocity? And what were the key pivots along the way?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, God, it feels like a long time now. But just high level, I've been a business owner for coming up to 5 years. I've been an advisor for 10, and I've been in the profession for just over 15 years. I studied economics at university. And when it came to graduating, I didn't want to jump straight into the whole kind of London finance thing. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I've always been a bit of a contrarian, wanted to do my own thing. So I moved back home, which was Leamington at the time, and just wanted a bit of a break, really, just to figure out what I wanted to do. So fast forward a couple of months and I'm running a cocktail bar in Leamington.
Of course.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it was a brilliant time in my life. And I just started just as doing a couple more hours work, but ended up getting into the sort of the cocktail making. And I think just showing, I mean, maybe this is a bit of a flavour for my whole career, but just showing a bit of willingness to learn and interest and sort of working hard, I quickly got promoted and ended up running the bar.
True entrepreneurial
I know,
spirit.
absolutely, yeah. Crowning achievement was I sort of finalised my own cocktail menu, which was great. And that was around 2008, 2009. So I actually graduated in 2007 and sort of almost missed one of the biggest financial crises we've ever had. But at the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do long term. And then it was a quiet shift early on in the evening, and got chatting to one of the guys I work with, a chap called Harry, and sort of just asked about what his dad did. And his dad was an IFA, so just got talking, and I thought, that sounds quite interesting. And just one of those sort of, flippant comments saying, do you think you can give me your dad's email? Do you think there's any opportunities? And I didn't think any more of it, but good as gold, he came back with an email address, and I sent funnily enough, I actually found it the other day. I was looking for an old CV just to get some dates and just to refresh myself how long I've been working. And I found the email, and it was a little bit cheeky. It's talking about, I wonder if there'd be an opportunity. I was sort of eager to learn, but I sort of ended it sort of saying that his son's financial security would be impacted by his decision. And I think that little bit, in particular sort of caught his attention, maybe a bit of personality. And then that got me in, really. It was a sort of an amazing first year in an IFA practice, working with 2 partners, baptism into the profession.
What a lesson. You don't ask, you don't get.
Absolutely, exactly. There's that great Michael Jordan quote, isn't there, that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
So true.
So, yeah, no, I think I didn't really look back then. My kind of next big break or pivot then was moving to a sort of a smaller firm, actually just down the road in Stratford. Fantastic business, proper financial planning business, high net worth clients, really complicated cases, real professional outfit. And that's where if I had to summarise my career, that was where I got a real foundation in financial planning and servicing clients. So that's where I transitioned to becoming an advisor. So I was there for a little over 5 years to the next pivot point. And I love that firm. And looking back, some of my most enjoyable days and career moments and learning experiences with some great mentors. But in terms of, I was looking at kind of my next steps of development. And whilst I've learned how to become a really good financial planner, I had that much experience of running a financial planning business or winning work. And that business was at a fantastic size, but it would have taken a lot to grow it to the next level. And that's when an opportunity came up to work for a much larger firm, high growth, that was setting up an office in Birmingham. And I was fortunate enough to get that role and to sort of go in day one, almost setting up my own business in a way, but with the security that it was
job at the end
Exactly,
of the day,
yeah. And I think one of the things for me, and it's probably a characteristic of the sort of financial planning part of the profession, is that we can't compromise, in terms of delivering that full financial planning. And this firm was sort of one of the only ones in the UK that sort of stuck to those principles, but also high growth. So what you typically find, I would say, is aside from a few that have done well and have been long established, financial planning firms tend to be owner managed, and the owner is the key person. Whereas this firm sort of did it properly, but were able to scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for 5 years, and I summarize it like this: the first 5 years of my career were learning how to be a really good financial planner, and the second part was more around winning work, winning clients, and growing a business.
To grow a practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say all the way along, I'd always had this, like I'm sure most entrepreneurs do, that I always wanted to do something on my own. And then COVID happened, and then other bits and bobs, and everything aligned just to be like, if I don't do it now, then
when do I do it? Yeah.
And
it's always going to be a risk.
Yeah, and we've been sensible with how we arranged our finances, and we were able to just sort of postpone like the big house move and things like that, just to give myself some breathing room as to see how it would work out. Because I started the business, we've got trading in February 2021, literally just a name on company's house and a little post box at a serviced office, and no clients, people that I connected with in the past and existing clients, but all of that was a big unknown as to what would happen.
And people will say, oh yes, I'll come, I'll follow you, but it doesn't actually mean they will, does it?
Well, exactly. And I had to, my mindset was expect nobody to follow, because again, like I said, the firm I left was a fantastic firm, and the clients would have been absolutely looked after if they stayed. And my mindset was, look, don't get me wrong, like my relationships with my clients have always been really good, but again, at the end of the day, the clients aren't going to move with you because you're a nice guy. They're going to first and foremost want to make sure that they're okay and that it's in their best interest. And waiting for all the contract stuff to play out, it wasn't until the sort of July or August that I started to get the emails coming in. And a number of clients came across. But in the meantime, I'd worked with clients that had nothing to do with the previous firms that I'd sort of met along the way. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd got to a good start there, which gave me a bit of confidence and helped to sort of fund some of the initial costs of the website and all that kind of stuff. And very quickly, by the November, I was sort of in a position where, in terms of the state of the business, it was sustainable. So kind of, I would say it's sort of one of the hardest businesses to start.
It's a long time to go though, isn't it, without a real salary?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'd sort of been sensible and sort of tried to save up a little bit of the kitty so that we didn't have to have beans on toast each night. But
as a financial planner, I'm sure you did. You had your budget, you were ready.
Well, I would say I'm one of those financial planners, sort of do as I say, not as I do. But I'm sure there's lots of entrepreneurs listening, but I kind of at no point did I ever really sort of worry too much. I thought, I think I'm a big believer in you've got to back yourself first before you expect anyone else to, and set out intention with a plan. Knew I was good at my job and was quietly confident, but obviously trying to navigate all the typical pitfalls and make sure we had a robust plan in place and, a vision and clear identity of what we wanted to be and what we didn't. But again, that was sort of, 10, 15 years in the making. Again, I see sort of lots of young planners that think the business bit is easy because they see you doing it, but they don't see I kind of think it was it felt easy because it had been that 10 to 15 years of prep to get there. And it's that final leap.
But is it easy?
No,
it's not.
There's again, like, I don't want to be one of these quotes, but it's like cycling. They sort of say, like, or any sort of like running, it's like it doesn't get easier. You just end up going faster, and it's just how you sort of get more comfortable living with that kind of baseline of stress.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
So when you first set up, and obviously you've got all these connections that you've made throughout your career, and I imagine there were some clients that were nervous to join a new business.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any wins where they've come on board later on, now that you're more established?
Yeah, no, it's a great one. I think you're absolutely right. And the picture I could paint is, why leave or any new client actually in that respect of, you could say, one-man band, But again, I think one of the things that I've always done is I've tried to look through the client's perspective, not be blind to these things or not to dismiss them as not important. So I think all the way along, I've looked at what are the pain points in those sorts of moves, and we tried to make it as easy as possible. So there wasn't huge disruption to, the way in which we manage investments or our investment philosophy or the providers that we use. If I could sort of try and say, like, actually, the only thing that's going to be changing is like the letterhead. And in terms of the important part, that the relationship with the people, the person that knows you best is potentially changing if you don't make a move.
That's an excellent piece of advice for anybody who wants to set up their own IFA.
Yeah, and I think, again, there's lots of things in the profession about like growth strategies and things like that, and how do you increase referrals. And I listened to a podcast from an American firm once, and it still stick with me to this day, and it's talking about all these different referral strategies. And he just simply said, if you want more referrals, make your service referable. And I think that's one of the things that we have set out to do. We've been sort of client orientated from the word go. And our philosophy is, if we've got happy clients and we're serving our clients extremely well and exceeding expectations, all the other stuff is just naturally going to follow.
It has to be shiny for them to look at and they want to buy it. It's a conversation I have with many clients when they're talking about growing their business. I'm like, well, is it shiny?
Yeah.
Is it ready to be bought? There's no point you paying for lead gen if you're not ready to sell, and if you're not ready to take those clients on, or if they're going to look at your website and it's pants.
I mean, that's a great point, actually. I mean, I spent a good chunk of money initially doing a big website, and I know a lot of firms that try and keep costs down, which is completely understandable, but I always thought you've got to spend the money where it's needed. Exactly, absolutely. So in terms of our branding project, our initial website, we were using the same firm that large firms use, because we just wanted that intention to come out of the blocks and not try and sort of scream. I think it's that kind of positive mindset. I think the reason why people tend not to spend is because they think it's not going to work out. And I think most entrepreneurs, I'd say, are that kind of growth mindset. You think, well, of course it's going to work. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So that was...
On your website, Velocity talks about thinking about money differently, treating life transactions as opportunities. Can you unpack this philosophy for me? How does it change the way you advise on pensions versus a purely investment-centric IFA?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the whole life transition thing came around really is when I was looking at kind of what's the sort of typical client that I serve in the past. And all of them have one thing in common, which these life transitions. And a life transition, there's many in a typical life, but it's something where your identity is fundamentally changing. We talked about a pivot point earlier. It's a sort of a life pivot point where the finances are massively affected, but you as an individual are massively affected.
So like having children, grandchildren, potentially getting married.
Exactly.
Divorced.
No, they're too biggie. So the first one that we sort of say is starting a family. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, it's not just you and your partner. There's somebody else to look out for. And that's, I think, the first time when things get serious, isn't it? Where most people first look at the possibility of getting a will, life insurance, all these other things. The most common ones that we work with are at the retirement space, so when people are looking to retire. And then also what we call the midlife check-in, which is, say, 50 to 55, where retirement doesn't feel a million miles away. And it's that first real check where it's like, am I okay? Am I on track?
I find most people leave it too late.
They do, yes.
I think 50 to 55 is too late to be looking at that.
No, you're right. And we do have a lot of clients much younger than that, but I would say, in terms of agreeing with you and not leaving it too late, I mean, if we could get more of the at retirement and we could get that extra 5 years, then that would be amazing. But yeah, those sorts of transitions where, the finances are fundamentally sort of up in the air, and, whether or not you're selling a business, getting divorced, the sort of the same process, the same way of thinking about it is the same for all of them. It's just technically there might be planning points which are slightly different for one or the other, but fundamentally the same sort of personal changes is involved.
It's making sure you've got enough money for the future plans, because the money you need will change regardless of those personal changes you may need.
Yeah, absolutely.
To pass on to generational wealth, you might need to lose half of it if you're getting divorced.
Yeah, and part of the way we look at this is, if things are fundamentally changing, then why not, as stressful as these sort of events can be, it's like, why not plan for, something amazing out of it, as opposed to just sort of, something mediocre. Why not aim a little bit higher? And that's where we help to, help clients create a vision of actually what does an amazing retirement or future look like.
Yeah, how are they going to have enough money to live the lifestyle that they want to continue to live?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's roll up our sleeves. There's been a lot of debate about pensions and all the changes that are happening in 2027. Have you found that this has changed the way that your clients have viewed pension planning? And what's your general advice for people who are going to be affected by this?
Yeah, these sorts of changes are all too commonplace at the moment. I mean, I don't have to sort of sell it to you, but the current status where, rules are constantly changing under political pressure and things like that, it just makes it incredibly hard to plan for the long term when you're never confident how long these rules are going to be. I think what we do as a practice is we know our clients really well, so we know those clients that are going to be most affected by this sort of planning. And the tendency has been over the years with the rules, which is to, generally speaking, don't really touch your pension if you don't need it. If you've got other assets in your estate which will be subject to inheritance tax, then why would you draw on your pensions first? And all of a sudden it looks like that has been tipped on its head. So we're talking with clients. We know those who are going to be affected, but we also know that we're talking about very long-term pots here, pension pots. We could be talking multiple decades, and not to do anything too knee-jerk. I mean, in the last 10 years there's been multiple changes to these sorts of rules that even during my sort of lifetime of practicing in the profession, it was once upon a time it was 55% tax charge on what was left, and then it was nothing, and now we've got inheritance tax again. So I think part of the difficulty, much like all the stuff that's coming in the budget or not coming in the budget, it's all the speculation, is it's just not good, right? Clients are understandably worried, so we're there to sort of support them, to let them know that we're looking at it, but equally not to make any kind of knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah, people want consistency, and we don't have that with this government right now.
Absolutely. We've done all the boring stuff, like read the consultation papers around the first sort of drafting of how things are going to work and all the responses, and we still don't know what the final rules are going to be. So we're sort of acknowledging it, we're going through it with our annual reviews and our meetings, and we've got it on the agenda, and we're starting to think what the strategy might be. But again, we're not quite there yet.
I think a lot of it may move towards generational wealth and passing that wealth on while you're younger than leaving it last minute. We deal with so many clients that I feel they've left it too late. They decide to sell their business and they want out next week.
Yes, yeah.
It's going to be a couple of years at least.
No, absolutely, yeah. And again, it's back to that point of, when do you engage with professionals? And the answer is, in my opinion, as early as possible.
Agreed. So, recent data shows that the number of firms authorised to give defined benefit transfer advice has dropped. Only 917 firms remain active in that space. What's driving that decline? Is it risk, compliance cost, or something else?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, we've seen a massive drop off. And in fact, whilst I've got the advanced qualifications to do those sorts of pension transfers, it's something that we don't practice ourselves. And I think two main reasons. I think there's the firm side, which is the compliance costs. Lots of firms have done these types of transactions in the past, but not as part of a wider, holistic, proper financial plan. So as in all professions, there's the sort of the rogues that have done this sort of at scale on an unsuitable way. So, there's lots of costs and regulatory expectations around it, which are quite challenging. But I think the main reason is really that transfer values have fallen off a cliff. So when rates started to increase at the back end of 2021, I think in the 12 months thereafter, the average transfer value fell by something like 45%.
Wow. And,
things have got worse thereafter as well, with the infamous mini budget, where gilt yields are today. So, if you think about that individual that was perhaps looking at £1 million transfer value, in the late 2010s, and all of a sudden that million is something like, 450, 550.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah. And also there's something around the sort of the age of the typical scheme member. I mean, those sort of final salary schemes, few and far between now. And I think there's an element of those that have sought that advice that they've sort of done. There aren't that many.
They're gold dust for an employee to get hold of, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, pre-2021, before interest rates started moving up, the transfer values we were seeing were enormous. So life-changing sums of money. And that whole area of advice is really interesting, because obviously they are fantastic and gold-plated and secure, but do they work for how people want to live their lives? It's like, in an ideal world, you'd have a blend of two, but yeah, in that sort of all or nothing, a lot of people, I mean, we've got some clients that did it and it's allowed them to do so much more than they would otherwise have been able to do. And I've only seen, amazing outcomes from that sort of advice. Obviously, because the bar is that much higher when you're dealing with sort of high risk sort of regulatory work, the bar has to be incredibly high. So yeah, I think that's why, and I don't see transfer values coming back anytime soon. So yeah, we'll see.
So Tony, there's a lot of changes coming in April 2027. A lot of changes people are worried about with pensions coming into inheritance tax scope. How are you preparing clients for this shift, and are you seeing changes in their behaviour?
Yeah, it's a really when it was originally announced, it's one of the things from the budget, wasn't it, that wasn't implemented overnight, and we've got a decent amount of time to get our heads around it. But I think one of the difficulties is the fact that, the final rules aren't out yet. I mean, we've read the consultation papers, the responses, and starting to get an idea of where the issues are going to be. But I think for us, it always starts with those clients that we think are going to be most affected. And, the strategy for the last, good few years has been to sort of not draw from your pension. And as a result, people have accumulated larger pots. So one of the things we're doing is just identifying those clients who are affected and starting to sort of get those on the radar.
Think about passing that down through the generations earlier than
just starting to understand what the sort of the tax is going to be, because one of the difficulty things is you can't gift or assign a pension.
No.
So it's a very tricky pot to actually deal with without incurring a lot of tax one way or another.
Got to get it out somehow, yeah.
Yeah, but we're always minded, with our clients, there's no knee-jerk reaction. There's no need to do anything immediately. I mean, as long as I've been working in the profession, we've worked with it. With the pension death benefits being subject to a 55% tax charge to nothing all of a sudden, now we're back to something in the middle with inheritance tax at 40%. It's a case of, these pensions are long-term investments. You're talking, multiple decades.
And you don't know what the law's going to be when you pop your clogs, do you?
And the rate at which we flip-flop with these sort of rule changes, we're, I think, not doing anything knee-jerk, identifying those clients that are affected and waiting until we can fully digest the rules and understand where the key sort of strategy is going to be.
Brilliant. Many people seem to struggle with the switch. They spend years and years building these pension pots, seeing this money accumulate. And then suddenly you retire and you've got to draw down. That can be quite frightening. How do you help guide clients through that?
Yeah, that's a really tricky area for clients. And funnily enough, in my inbox at the moment, we're talking about this very thing of a client that's finding it quite hard, even though they know they've got
this
more
runway
than enough.
Of years.
to start to spend and give themselves permission to spend. So I think, again, the sort of the behaviours or the characteristics that, make that individual successful at building that pot in the first place tend to be different from, those that can sort of spend quite easily. So I think the first thing is that whole reassurance piece of, and the heart of a financial plan, which is, have you got enough? And I think once clients can get confidence that they have got enough, one of the ways in which they give themselves permission to spend. I mean, we also, as part of any kind of client in, what we'd call the technical decumulation mode, when you're drawing from assets or capital, I think it's around matching sort of lower risk pots to known sort of short-term expenditure. So rather than having everything invested and you're going to go on that big holiday in 3 years' time or celebrate that anniversary in a big way in 4 years' time.
Or redo the kitchen.
Or get that new car. It's a case of having that money sort of tucked aside and earmarked for that very purpose, so that, whatever the markets are throwing at you, that they can continue to enjoy life, because, the markets all come back, but you don't get those years back.
That's very true. I mean, lots of analysis shows that retirees often underestimate how long they'll live by several years. So how do you stress test against that?
Yeah, so I think the data on this is something like, the average male life is sort of late 70s and women live a bit longer, early 80s. But again, one of the things is, digging deeper into the data is that, our clients that tend to be, touch wood, healthier, more affluent, better access to healthcare, you'd say that actually as a segment, they're probably living longer than that on average anyway.
Wealthy people do live longer, it's proven.
And so one of the things that we do is just, all of our cash flows are and forecast to age 100 as a standard. But I've got some funny stories about things like that, with clients. The general sort of response is, oh, I'm not going to live that long. And,
Yeah.
But we also had a funny one many years ago with a client that was a centurion, and the cash flow charts that we project, they've got your financial life mapped out, and each sort of bar of the chart is a calendar year. And with this chap in particular, it started to look a bit stark that we only had sort of 5 bars left. So every time we met, we just had to kick it on a little bit.
That's quite sad, isn't it? So what are your views on annuities? They used to be the only thing you could do, and they seem to have gone a little bit out of fashion. But what are your views on them?
Yeah, so annuities really, I think they dropped off a cliff with pension freedoms back in 2016, where the compulsory annuitisation disappeared. And much like we were talking about earlier, actually, but for the opposite reasons, with interest rates going up and gilt yields increasing, I sort of say annuities are back on the table for sure. In the for every client that's in drawdown within the firm, we, as part of our process, we look at annuities each year. And at the moment, you've got a kind of almost a perfect storm of, markets at all-time highs, annuity rates are looking pretty healthy. And the final nudge that some clients are getting is the fact that, pensions are going to be subject to inheritance tax in 2027. So I think I wouldn't say people are going out and buying annuities for those very reasons, but I think where the client circumstances mean that's a sort of suitable way, they are looking at it and
as a potential.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of clients are still of the mind that they want control over their money, and that leaving 60% of something after 40% inheritance tax is still better than not leaving anything.
Well, they might change their mind if they put the inheritance tax rate up.
Absolutely, but it's one of those things of, I think, in the right client scenario. The most recent one we did was where it's sort of managing the finances, it's more than it was. And it's not an all or nothing type approach. So we might target, say, up to the higher rate threshold with secure income, but no more than that. But it really depends on the client's circumstances. But the market is, it's very much back on the radar and looking attractive for some clients.
Good. Right, Tony, let's do a rapid fire round. Pension or pretend. I'm going to give you some scenarios. Tell me if you think it's solid pension move or just financial fantasy. So, first one, I'll retire on my rental income alone.
Yeah, so I'd say fantasy for that one. And then I think the best approach that we see is where clients have a blend of assets as opposed to just being in one sort of particular type. I mean, this goes the same for pension as well. We see lots of clients that have just got a pension, but I think the best sort of structures are good amount of cash, good amount of investments, things like ISAs, investment accounts, good pension, good secure income, properties on the side. As a blended strategy, it works perfectly well. But, from my experience over the last year in particular, those that have got property portfolios are actually looking to unwind them with all of the new red tape and all the difficulties.
And there's tip that there might be more changes in that area as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Okay, so second one. It's one I hear a lot. My partner's got a great pension, so I'll just piggyback off theirs.
Yeah, no, that's one of those sort of keep calm and marry rich type things, Yeah, I understand why those sorts of things can happen with working lives and whatnot. But again, it's part of that strategy of having, lots of different pots to call upon, people's tax bands, etc. So I think if the more balanced it can be, the better.
What if you get divorced? You might lose that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So number 3, I'll sell my business when I'm ready to retire, and then I'll ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, so over the years, I've worked with loads of entrepreneurs, and sort of going back to some of our original discussions around that sort of growth mindset, I don't think there are many business owners out there that are thinking that their business is going to be the one that fails, but clearly they do. And I think one of the things that we try and do with entrepreneurs is, as much as possible, put that plan B in place.
I think it's definitely a fantasy one, isn't it? Because things can change. Imagine if you were the owner of Blockbuster and it was worth nothing in a few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those, again, for us, it's that sort of making hay whilst the sun shines. When the business is doing well, it costs so much to extract money from the business that, things like funding pensions along the way, sensible tax planning that can really make that sort of difference.
Definitely can. So final one. I put my money into my workplace pension. I'm sorted.
Yes. Yeah. I have to say what we're seeing now is over the years, workplace pensions are getting better, but again, one of the things that we see over and over again is not necessarily the pension, but the fund choices that people make. And this would be my one sort of takeout, and my one tip just for people to check is, you know what it's like when you start a new firm. There's all the paperwork, and then you get enrolled with the new pension, and you probably tick a box, and that's your investment choice selected for the next 30 years. But again, what we tend to find is that people will take far less risk than they should do. And there are a lot of funds that, I understand why they're there, things like lifestyling funds or target date funds, where they're sort of pre-designed to reduce the risk as you approach retirement. These sort of one-size-fits-all models. But again, they're not good for everyone. And I think definite fantasy there. They can be good, but I just think we often see people don't look twice at what they're invested in. And
they end up with loads of pots all over the place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tony, this has been absolute gold, seriously. Thank you for cutting through the pension panic and reminding us that retirement isn't a vibe, it's a plan. So where can people find you if they want to stop winging it and start winning it with their pensions?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a website, velocityfp.co.uk. We've got some fantastic guides and newsletter, lots of content that we put out, so people can sign up to that. We have free consultations where you can book in half an hour with us just to discuss what's on your mind. And then you can head over to Vouch For as well and see what, rather than take my word for it, you can see what our clients say about our services. So yeah, they're the main ways.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tony.
Yeah, pleasure.
All right, listeners, you've heard it. Whether you're still figuring out Nest from SIP or you're out here trying to retire on your crypto gains, it's time to get real. Until next time, FFS, for finance's sake, check the numbers.